Hello everyone! Today I am talking about stroke. Everyone has heard of strokes, right? Perhaps you or someone you know has suffered from a stroke. But do you actually know what a stroke is? According to the American Heart Association, a stroke occurs when a blood vessel that carries oxygen and nutrients to the brain is either blocked by a clot or ruptures. When that happens, the brain cannot get the blood and oxygen that it needs, and so the brain and its cells die. It's a bummer. There are two main types of strokes: ischemic stroke and hemorrhagic stroke. So let's look at our picture. We are looking at a person from the chest up. Observe how the blood vessels of the brain come from the heart. It's all the same system. So now let's focus on the blood flow to the brain. Blood flows from the heart up through the arteries, which are typically depicted in red. The arteries enter the brain on the left and the right in the posterior circulation. They enter up here centrally and then branch off to either side. So let's zoom in a little bit. This is a brain. We're looking at it at an angle, and part of it has been cut away so that you can see the arteries. An ischemic stroke occurs when something blocks the flow to a part of the brain. So if something obstructs an artery, for instance, here, blood can't flow past the obstruction to feed the tissues further downstream. And that area is the area that suffers the stroke. A hemorrhagic stroke occurs when a blood vessel of the brain ruptures. Rupture is a fancy word for burst or tear. Let's say this artery right here, and they gave us a zoom in, tears. The surrounding area of the burst artery is directly affected by the blood that gets extravasated, and also it suffers ischemia, like in an ischemic stroke, because that pathway has been disrupted, and so downstream areas of the brain don't get the blood flow that they need. So now you have learned about the two types of strokes, ischemic and hemorrhagic. Now let's talk about the ways a stroke can affect a person. Perhaps you or someone you know has had a stroke. They may have drooping of the mouth, arm weakness on one side, but then you have a friend who knows someone else who had a stroke, and they look totally normal, but they lost part of their vision. So how can the same event affect different people in different ways? The answer is one of my favorite topics in neurology: functional neuroanatomy. Functional neuroanatomy refers to the relationship between a brain or spinal cord structures and the function of those structures. Let's take a look at this illustration, okay? This yellow area depicts the primary motor cortex. This region contains neurons or nerve cells that are responsible for voluntary movement. Let's say, for example, that I want to move my right arm. Here's a picture of the brain on the left. So there is firing of the neurons in the left primary motor cortex. This impulse travels through structures of the brain and into the spinal cord, where it crosses to the other side and continues down to connect with nerves that then go into the arm and deliver the impulse to the muscles that control the movement that I want to make. Pretty cool, right? Now let's bring it all together. Here's the brain's vascular system. So if a blood vessel here is obstructed, that means that blood carrying oxygen cannot get to the tissues that it feeds. So blood and oxygen can't go downstream. In our example, this area in particular corresponds to the motor neurons that control the opposite side arm. Those neurons are damaged and therefore cannot generate the impulses to make the voluntary movement. The same principle applies to all areas of the brain. A blockage in one part affects a different region of the brain, which has a different function and thus produces different symptoms. That is why different people who experience a stroke may have different symptoms. All right, so you guys have the basics of stroke. In upcoming talks, I'll go more in depth into the subject. In the comments, please let me know what you want to know about. Tell me if you like this format, if you hate it, but be nice. And as always, my ideas come from you. I want you guys to stay neuro-curious. Bye-bye.